It all began with small signs, subtle cracks in the foundation. The Fever's season ended not with celebration, but with exhaustion. Players looked disjointed, the chemistry was off, and even the most optimistic fans could sense the unease. Steve Simon reportedly stormed out of the final game and muttered something that summed up his disappointment perfectly. "We're still running this like it's 2015. That wasn't just about basketball tactics. It was a shot at the organization's entire culture. Simon believed the franchise was stuck in the past, clinging to an outdated model that couldn't survive in today's WNBA. He wanted evolution. He wanted a new era built on entertainment, star power, and marketability. To him, Caitlin Clark wasn't just a player. She was the product, a brand, the face that could turn Indiana into a national phenomenon and transform the Fever into a powerhouse business. Stephanie White, however, believed in something more traditional. Her philosophy was rooted in teamwork, structure, and accountability. 5 players moving as one unit, defense first, earned success. It was a clash of ideologies, and it didn't take long before their visions collided. Insiders say that one heated exchange between Simon and White changed everything. White argued that building too much around one player could fracture the team's chemistry and hinder long-term growth. Simon, according to those close to the situation, cut her off and reminded her that he wasn't running a charity. He was building an empire. After that day, trust between the two disintegrated completely. From that point forward, Stephanie White coached the team, but Simon controlled the show. Every decision she made seemed to be shadowed by ownership's presence. The locker room soon began to split into 2 camps, those loyal to White and those drawn to Clark. Players who stood with White admired her steady hand and experience. They said she was the only one holding the locker room together when things got tough. But others, especially the younger stars who saw Clark as the future, leaned toward Simon's vision. What started as quiet disagreements soon became visible tension. Film sessions grew silent. Players stopped communicating the same way. Huddles looked rehearsed instead of inspired. Reporters began to notice. They described a team that looked unified on the court but fractured everywhere else. Behind closed doors, it was being called the Fever Mutiny, not an all-out rebellion, but a slow, quiet breakdown of trust. It wasn't long before Simon decided he needed proof to justify the change. He ordered an internal review of all leadership positions, a move that sent chills through the organization. On paper, it was described as a structural evaluation, but insiders knew what it really meant, a loyalty test. Either you aligned with Simon's new direction, or you'd soon be shown the door. Executives were told to assess every role based on organizational alignment, and that phrase alone told everyone what was coming. It was corporate language for obedience. Within days, word began to leak. Steve Simon wanted a new coach before training camp. Behind the scenes, his team began quietly building a short list of replacements. The names being floated weren't just experienced coaches, they were strategists who understood modern basketball as entertainment. Younger, analytics-driven, social media savvy. Some even had connections to Iowa, with direct knowledge of Clark's playing style and system. This wasn't about finding the best basketball mind. It was about finding someone who could elevate the Caitlin Clark brand to its highest level. In Simon's eyes, the Fever weren't just a sports team anymore. They were a growing media property, and the coach needed to reflect that vision. The news hit the locker room hard. Veteran players who had stood by White through losing seasons were devastated. For them, she wasn't just a coach. She was a leader who believed in their growth when no one else did. One insider claimed several players were near tears after hearing that her fate might already be sealed. Meanwhile, the younger generation, those closer to Clark, stayed silent. Their quiet neutrality was interpreted by ownership as approval. But that silence only deepened the divide. The official response from the Fever organization was cold and calculated. A brief statement said the team was evaluating its direction for next season. No mention of White, no confirmation, no denial. Employees were instructed not to discuss the rumors, stay off social media, and maintain message discipline. Behind the corporate spin, however, the truth was clear. Steve Simon was preparing to take full control. The same way he'd restructured other parts of his sports empire, he was now reshaping the Fever from the inside out. Fans noticed the shift almost immediately. Online forums filled with debate. Some called it betrayal, claiming Simon was destroying the heart of the franchise. Others defended him, arguing that this was what progress looked like. For every voice calling Stephanie White the soul of the team, another argued that Caitlin Clark was the league's future. That's the irony of it all. The same player who revitalized national interest in women's basketball may have also become the spark for her own franchise's internal war. But to truly understand what's happening, you have to follow the money. Since Clark's arrival, the Fever's financial performance has skyrocketed. Ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships, all breaking records. Every dollar flowing into Pacers sports and entertainment, the corporation Steve Simon controls. So when locker room friction began hurting public perception, Simon didn't see emotions or relationships. He saw numbers slipping. The brand in his mind was under threat. And like any sharp businessman, he was ready to protect it at all costs. Insiders say Simon's logic is brutally simple. You can't build a billion-dollar product with division at the top. In his eyes, White wasn't failing as a coach, she was failing as a brand manager. The Fever needed a leader who could merge basketball with business, someone who understood that winning games wasn't enough anymore. It was about building a spectacle, selling a story, and keeping fans emotionally invested through star power. That's why marketing executives are now reportedly being consulted in the coaching search to make sure the next hire fits not only on the court but in the brand strategy. The consequences of this decision could reshape the entire WNBA. If Simon replaces White with a coach who fully embraces his Clark-first model, Indiana could become a prototype for how modern women's sports operate, profitable, flashy, and market-driven. But at what cost? Because culture isn't something you rebuild with spreadsheets. Once trust erodes, once loyalty disappears, what remains can feel hollow. The Fever might soon look like a winning franchise on paper, but fans will always remember when the heart of the team was replaced by a marketing plan. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe this is just the natural evolution of the game, a collision between old-school integrity and new-age business. But one thing's certain, Steve Simon doesn't make emotional decisions. He makes precise ones. If insiders are right, Stephanie White's days in Indiana are numbered, and her exit will be swift and clinical. No emotion, no drama, just a press release and a thank you quote. The Indiana Fever may rise higher than ever before under this new direction. The arenas may sell out, the headlines may glow, and Caitlin Clark may lead a new golden age of WNBA attention. But the question that lingers is deeper. Can success built on control ever feel authentic? Can a team thrive when the soul of its culture is traded for profitability? So what do you think? Is Steve Simon making the right move to push the Fever into a new era, or is he sacrificing the heart of the team for the sake of power and business? Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next big story unraveling behind the scenes. Because whatever happens next in Indiana, it's going to change the WNBA forever.